Okay, so we'll solve the same problem, but we'll do it numerically. And I guess I'd like to make the point first of all that one of the power of having a numerical solution is that the problem can be a lot more complicated than this one, right? You can deal with temperature-dependent properties and the heat transfer coefficient having to be recalculated and just all kinds of things that you can't deal with in an analytical solution. But it's nice to solve the same problem again because we can look at the exact solution, which is the analytical solution, and compare it to the numerical solution and understand sort of the accuracy characteristics of the numerical solution. So any of these numerical models, any of these transient numerical models, are going to require what's called a state equation, right? And this state equation, just in general, is this equation. Doesn't have to be an equation, but a methodology that allows you to calculate the derivative of a state variable given the value of the variable and time, right? So in heat transfer, our state variable is going to be temperature, so we need to be able to calculate the derivative of temperature given the value of temperature and time. Once I have this state equation, this really stops being a heat transfer problem and starts just being a math problem, and we can bring to bear all of the work that's been done on numerical solution of transient problems. It could easily or equivalently be a problem in any kind of a dynamic domain, right? It doesn't have to be a heat transfer problem. So, yeah, we have to start by deriving this state equation. We don't have to solve it analytically. We just have to derive it, right? And just to be clear, it doesn't have to be an equation, right? In other types of models, we just have to know temperature and time and then be able to go through a set of calculations that result in the derivative of temperature. Okay, for this equation, for this problem, our state equation is pretty simple, right? We have this equation right here, which we had derived previously. This was our governing equation. It basically says that dt is driven by convection, right? So if I give you temperature and I give you time, you can then tell me d-temperature, d-time, right? So this is what we have to use as the engine for our numerical model, right? And every one of these numerical techniques that we're going to talk about are really just methods that we can use to go from the beginning of a time step to the end of a time step, right? And they get more and more complicated, and as they get more and more complicated, the answer that you get at the end of the time step becomes more and more exact, right? More and more close to the actual answer. Or alternatively, it allows you to take bigger and bigger time steps, right? So we have to divide our time up into little steps, right? So we have, again, not some function, right? When we did our analytical solution, we ended up with a temperature as a function of time. Here, we're not going to end up with that. We're going to end up with predictions of temperatures at discrete times, right? And these are the different times at which I'm going to predict temperature. So time 1 is going to be 0, and then time m is going to be my simulation time. And I'm going to just uniformly distribute time steps throughout my domain, which is probably the worst way to do it. The best way to do it is you actually always adjust your time steps such that you get some specified amount of accuracy. So when not much is happening, you can take really big time steps, and when something interesting is happening, you can have to take really small time steps. But at least for the ones that we're going to implement ourselves, we'll use this approach here, where every time step duration is the same. It's just the simulation time divided by m minus 1, because I've broken the simulation time up into m little steps. And then all the times are given by this equation here. So time 1 is 1 minus 1 is 0, so I'm over here. Time m is m minus 1 over m minus 1 is 1, so I'm at tsim. Okay, so that's the idea. And we will start with the simplest and probably the worst technique, which is Euler's technique, right? So what Euler's technique says is, if I want to predict the temperature at the end of a time step, I'm going to take the temperature at the beginning of the time step, and I'm going to calculate the derivative once using the state equation, and I'm just going to assume that it's constant throughout the time step, right? So I'll calculate the derivative once. I'll do that at the beginning of the time step where I know everything, right? I know this temperature, I know this temperature. I'll assume that derivative is constant, and I'll just use it to shoot over here to the end of the time step. So I'm guessing you've seen Euler technique before. We're going to implement this for this problem. This is simple enough that I could probably do it right away without much trouble, but I want to show you a sort of a trick or a method that is going to reduce the frustration that you have when you implement these kind of transient numerical models. And that idea is, rather than immediately try to take all the time steps, the first thing you ought to think about doing is just taking the first time step. Because if I can take the first time step, if I can go from T1 to T2, right? So T1 is at time 1 and T2 is at time 2, then it's really easy for me to go through all the time steps, right? But this is a lot easier to debug, one time step than a whole bunch of time steps. So that's kind of my suggestion to you as you do these kind of problems is think about taking the first time step, and when that works, then think about taking all the time steps. So here's Euler's technique written for the first time step, right? It says T2 is equal to T1 plus, I have to take my state equation for this problem, which is this guy right here, and plop it into here and evaluate it at the beginning of the time step, right? I'm evaluating it here. That's what Euler's technique tells me to do. So if I take that and put it here, I get this equation right here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll implement it. It's kind of silly for this problem because it's such a simple problem, right? It's basically just saying T1 is T initial, and then T2 I just take using this state equation right here. And when I calculate it and look at the solution, this is what I get. I can check the units. I can make sure everything looks okay. Once that's working, then it's really easy to take all the time steps. So you build, at least in ease, you use a duplicate loop. In MATLAB, you'd use a for loop. But you duplicate j equal 1 to n minus 1. You take the code that you just got done writing and you know it works, and you plop it between these two duplicate loops. And then the last thing you do is you replace 1 with j. So every place I have a 1 here would be a j, and every place I have a 2, that's going to be a j plus 1. And if you do that carefully, you'll find that just works. So let's go back over here. I'm going to now take this code here, and I'll copy it, and I'll paste it right into here. And then every place I had a 1, actually I can't take that, sorry. That's not gonna work. Every place I had a 1, I now have a j. Every place I have a 2, I now have a j plus 1. And with any luck, yeah, this is the solution, right? So again, you know, kind of a trivial problem to do that with, but as we get to harder and harder problems, and certainly as we get to one-dimensional problems, this is going to be a technique that's going to really be helpful. Okay, so that's the Euler technique. Like I said, the Euler technique is probably the worst, and it's the worst both in terms of accuracy and stability, right? So what I'm going to do here is look at the difference between these temperatures that I predict using the Euler technique and the actual temperature, which is the one I got using the analytical technique, right? So all I'm doing is predicting the temperature at every one of these times using the analytical technique, and then I'm going to take the error, which is the absolute value of the difference between the real temperature, the analytical temperature, and then the numerical prediction of that temperature right here. And then the global error is just going to be the max of those errors. So right now, my time step is 0.04 seconds, and my global error is about 8.5 Kelvin, right? So if I want that global error to go down, obviously I need to take more time steps. So you need to use a smaller time step duration. So I'm going to, instead of doing 11 or 10 steps, I'll do 100 steps. So now my time step is 4 milliseconds, and my global error has gone down to about 0.73 Kelvin. So if you look at that, what it says is that a 10x reduction in the time step duration has led to approximately a 10x reduction in the global error. So the global error must be proportional to delta t to the first power, right? So that says that the Euler technique is first order. The other way you know the Euler technique is first order is because to get through a time step, for me to go from time 1 to time 2, I only had to evaluate the state equation one time. It's first order, okay? So why is it that this technique leads to a first order result? So if you think about the exact solution at the end of the time step, you would get that with the Taylor series expansion around the temperature at the beginning of the time step, right? So that would be the temperature at the beginning of the time step, and then you have the first derivative times delta t, the second derivative times delta t squared over 2 factorial, the third derivative, the fourth derivative, on to infinity, right? This would be the actual solution. And the actual solution is not equal to our Euler technique, right? If we go back to the Euler technique, where is it here? The Euler technique is only related to the first derivative times delta t, right? So the Euler technique approximation is really only this part of the actual solution. All of this other stuff out here, this is all neglected terms. This is the error that I get every time I take a step, right? Every time I take a step, my step gives me this answer and omits all of this other stuff. And the biggest part of all of this other stuff is the first term, right? The delta t squared term. So my local error is proportional to delta t squared. My global error is proportional to delta t to the first power, but every time I take a step, I get an error that's proportional to delta t squared. This constant of proportionality must be related to how big the second derivative is, right? So the reason that my global error and my local error scale differently is because the global error is the accumulation of all these local errors, right? So if you think about that, every time I take a step, I'm going to get a little bit more of a local error. So just very approximately, that says that the global error is m, the number of time steps, times all my local errors. And m is equal to t sim divided by delta t, right? That's the number of time steps I have to take. So this delta t and this delta t squared is going to give me delta t to the first power, right? That's a characteristic of a first order technique. It's not very accurate. If I want to become more accurate, I have to take many more steps, right? It's a linear relationship. The other characteristic of Euler technique that makes it not so great is that it's an explicit technique, right? So if you look at this equation that I'm using, I guess we should look at this equation that I'm using to go forward each time step. It's an explicit equation. I know everything there is to know at the beginning of the time step, so it's an explicit equation for the temperature at the end of the time step, right? There's no implicit equation solving required. Here, I know the temperature at the beginning of the time step. I know the time at the beginning of the time step. I can immediately calculate the temperature at the end of the time step. And one of the outcomes or the results of this being an explicit technique is that it will end up being unstable. So if I take a time step that's too big, I'm going to find that my explicit technique becomes unstable. And we can anticipate what too big is. And the way you do that is you just look at this equation here and you collect everything that's multiplying the temperature at the beginning of the time step. So here I have a 1, and then here I have a delta t over tau, minus delta t over tau. So this equation, if I rearrange it, is the temperature at the beginning of the time step multiplied by 1 minus delta t over tau. And then I have this other stuff here. But when this will become unstable is when this coefficient that's multiplying the temperature at the beginning of the time step goes to 0 or below 0. When it becomes negative, it will be unstable, right? And if you think about it, it makes a little bit of sense that if I'm multiplying the temperature at the beginning of the time step by a negative number, it's going to want to flip back and forth and do some kind of weird oscillating thing. So this is going to become negative when delta t becomes bigger than tau lumped, right? When this quantity here becomes bigger than 1. So the critical time step is the lumped capacitance time step of the object, right? Which makes sense. If I want to simulate an object that has a really small time constant, I'm going to have to take really small time steps. And we can see that here. If I go back here, right now, if I put this back at 11, I have a time step of 0.04. I have a time constant of 0.29. My time step is less than my time constant. And so my solution is stable, right? I get a stable solution. if we look at it here, it may not be super accurate, but it's pretty stable, right? If I were to do something to change that, I could either take bigger time steps or I could reduce the time constant. So let's reduce the time constant to something that is smaller. So now I just divided the density by 100. What that really does over here is it makes the time constant 3 milliseconds. My time step is 0.04 seconds. So my time step is much bigger than my time constant now, and so my explicit technique should go unstable. And if you look at these temperatures, sure enough, that's not even anything, right? That's become completely unstable. It's a growing oscillation at this point, right? So that's a downside of using an explicit technique. This is an explicit technique, so the other thing I should point out is that an upside of it is that you don't have to use e's, right? This equation right here, and every equation you need to do an explicit technique, you can program easily in any programming language because these are all just assignments, right? There's a MATLAB code on the course website that implements the same solution because it's very easy to take this ease code and just convert it to MATLAB, right? When we get to implicit techniques, that's not so easy anymore. So that's what we'll talk about in the next lecture is some more advanced techniques than this one, and they'll be more advanced in one or two ways, right? One way that will be more advanced is that they'll be higher order. So there'll be techniques where in order to get through a time step, I have to evaluate the state equation many times, and what that does then is increases the order, which means that it will have much better error characteristics. The other way that we can make this better is we can use an implicit technique, and an implicit technique is one that has better stability characteristics, right? So I don't have to keep a time step below some critical value in order to remain stable.